So I know school's back in session, and that brings a lot of different feelings and emotions for us. Is anyone excited that school's back? Okay, so a couple of people are excited, but my guess is that most of us are not excited that it's back. But one thing that I think we can all get excited for is a good science experiment. Am I right? Everyone loves a good science experiment. And I prepped this a little bit beforehand just for the sake of time, and so I didn't make a big mess on stage. But basically what I have is I filled it 3/4 full with vegetable oil, okay? 1/4 full with water, and then I put some food coloring in, and as you can see, nothing's happening, right? It's just kind of sitting there. That's because we have to add in our catalyst, okay? And so a catalyst is a substance that increases the rate of a chemical reaction. Okay, a catalyst, when applied, it can create big change and transformation, and don't hold your breath because nothing's going to explode or anything like that, but I do think it's a cool little experiment. And so we have these little tablets that serve as our catalyst, and when we add them in, the reaction starts. You can see it bubbling a little bit. And as you can start to see, we have our own little at-home DIY lava lamp, right? Kind of cool. The thing is, this doesn't happen, nothing happens until we add the catalyst, right? The catalyst, the Alka-Seltzer tablets are what speed up the reaction. They're what bring about the change to all of the different elements that are in the bottle. A catalyst, in other words, is something small that when put in action can spark change and transformation. And that's what this whole series is about. Okay, so this whole series is called Catalyst, and we've identified 4 different areas, 4 different things that we believe that if you put into action, that can help your faith grow. They can spark growth and transformation in your own faith. Because I think the reality is, and I think we can all agree and acknowledge this, is that sometimes we might feel like we get stuck in our faith. There's times when we feel like we've hit a wall. There's times when we don't feel like we're growing like we want to. There's times when we might not even have the desire to grow. And in those times, when we get to that place when it feels like we're not growing, we need something that we can do to help us grow. We need a catalyst that we can apply to our life to bring about that growth and transformation that it seems like we're lacking in that season. And tonight, the catalyst that we're going to be focusing on is serving. I believe that serving can be a catalyst for our faith. It can be something that helps us grow and take that next step in our faith when applied and when we do it. And so I want to dive right into our story for tonight. It comes from Acts chapter 6. This whole series will be in the book of Acts. Our story from tonight comes from Acts chapter 6. You can follow along in the Bible app or on the screens as well. So it says, "But as the believers rapidly multiplied, there were rumblings of discontent. The Greek-speaking believers complained about the Hebrew-speaking believers, saying that their widows were being discriminated against in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 called a meeting of all the believers. They said, 'We apostles should spend our time teaching the word of God, not running a food program. And so, brothers, select 7 men who are well-respected and full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will give them this responsibility. Then we apostles can spend our time in prayer and teaching the word.' Everyone liked this idea, and they chose the following: Stephen, a man full of faith in the Holy Spirit; Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas of Antioch, an earlier convert to the Jewish faith. These 7 were presented to the apostles, who prayed for them as they laid their hands on them. So God's message continued to spread. The numbers of believers greatly increased in Jerusalem, and many of the Jewish priests were converted too." So that's our text. That's our story for tonight. And the first thing that I want us to understand about serving is that serving is about meeting needs. Serving is about meeting needs. At the most basic level, at the very core of what serving is, it's about meeting needs. It's about looking around you, identifying an area that there is a need, and then doing something to meet that need. In our story for tonight, the church is growing rapidly. The 12 apostles, they're preaching, they're teaching, they're doing miracles, they're doing healings, and people are coming. The church is growing in huge ways, which is great, but the problem was that they didn't have enough people to serve the people in the best way. There were only the 12 of them, and they couldn't meet all of the needs that everyone had. One of these areas that they just couldn't meet was the distribution of food. So there are widows and other people that basically weren't able to to take care of themselves for different reasons. And the apostles were not able to teach the word and travel and do the miracles like they were doing, but also take care of these physical needs and distribute the food the way that it was supposed to be distributed. And so they brought this group of 7 guys and they gave them this task. And this was huge for the church because now the apostles were able to focus on what they felt was the more important thing, which was preaching and teaching. But if they didn't have those 7 guys that were willing to go serve, then they wouldn't have been able to do both effectively. But now they had a team that was willing to meet that need, willing to distribute the food, and then the apostles could continue to preach and teach the word. And I think with this especially, it's important to recognize that serving isn't always about doing the biggest or the most glamorous thing, right? Taking care of widows and feeding the widows probably isn't as fun or glamorous as preaching and teaching people about Jesus. Serving isn't always about doing the biggest thing. It's not always about doing the most fun thing. It's not always about doing the thing that's going to get you the most recognition, but it's about meeting needs. And just because something isn't necessarily fun or glamorous or up here on a scale doesn't mean that it's not serving a purpose. It's always serving a purpose. Nothing that we do out of love will ever be for no reason. It's not about how big or small the task is. It's about being willing to do whatever is needed to meet the needs that are present. When I think about this in my own life, I think back to when I was in college, which I act like is a long time ago, but it was like 3 months ago. But when I was in college, I played basketball. And we had a pretty nice locker room. It was a smaller school, but we had a nice locker room. And one of the perks of our locker room was our nutrition center. Okay, so in the back, we had this nutrition center. It was basically like a mini kitchen where you could make smoothies and protein shakes and grab snacks and stuff before and after practice. It was really nice, but now imagine about 15 to 20 guys, ages 18 to 22, 23, all sharing this area. It got really messy, okay? And people just didn't clean up after themselves, and it drove me crazy because guys would make shakes, they'd make smoothies, whatever. They'd just throw their empty cup in the sink. They'd leave the peanut butter sitting on the shelf with the cap to the jar right next to it. Instead of just screwing on the cap and putting it back where it goes, they would just put the spoon that they used with the peanut butter in the sink, still with peanut butter on it, dirty, just expecting someone else to take care of it. As you can probably tell, this really frustrated me. Okay, I did not like it. It's not that hard to clean up after yourself. I would often complain to people that weren't on the team, and it really bothered me. Well, eventually I got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to clean it. Okay, and so I made the commitment that every time that I saw the sink dirty and the nutrition center was dirty, I would just make the commitment to clean it because I felt like this was a practical way that I could serve my team. I didn't love it. It wasn't very fun because I was cleaning it almost every day. Most people didn't even know that I did it because I'd be in there when others weren't, but this was a practical way that I could serve my team, and so I committed to doing it. Because serving, it isn't always about doing the big, the glamorous thing, the thing that's going to get you the recognition, the thing that everyone's going to see and applaud, right? It's not about being up on stage, but it's about doing the things that meet the needs that you see around you. We have to remember that serving serves a purpose. No matter how big or small it is, no act of service that we do out of love will ever be for no reason. It will always serve a purpose, even if you don't see it or recognize it in the moment. And I love how Paul talks about serving in Galatians. He says, "For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. For the whole law can be summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself." The truth is, we have the freedom to do a lot of things, right? We have the freedom to use our time however we want to, so why not use some of that time to serve people? Why not use some of that time to meet the needs around us? Why not use some of that time to extend the love of Jesus to the person right across the street? Why not use some of that time to make a difference, to do something that matters, to potentially change someone's life? We have the freedom to do what we want, but why not use that freedom, use that time to serve others in love? You never know how God might use a small act of obedient love. God can do amazing things in and through people that are willing to serve. The second thing that I want us to see from this text and understand about serving is that serving impacts you, not just them. What I mean by this is serving impacts the person serving, not just the person that's being served. Okay, so I think we can all understand, and I think we'd all agree that when you serve someone, it impacts them on some level, right? Think about mowing your neighbor's lawn, right? It impacts them. It saves them time. Maybe they're not able to do that. You extend love to them in that way. You're impacting that person, but serving also impacts the person doing the serving. And this is what this whole series is about, right? And tonight, the idea is that if we serve, if we step out in faith in that way, then our faith will grow. Serving is a very practical way that we can grow our faith. If we want to grow our faith, then serving is something we have to do. And I think this is true for a couple reasons. The first is that we are never more like Jesus than when we serve. In moments that we serve, we are never more like him than in those moments. And that's because serving was just what Jesus did. That's why he came. Everything he did was out of love and out of service to us and to the people around him. Mark 10:45 says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Jesus came to serve. That's who he was. That's at the root of everything that he did. And so I think when we adopt his heart and imitate him in this way, I think something special really happens. We're never more like Jesus than when we serve. The second reason that I think this can help grow our faith is that I think our faith is kind of like a muscle. Okay, it's something that needs to be exercised. It's something that needs to be worked out. So if you think about your muscles on your body, one way to grow your muscles and get stronger is by lifting weights. If you want to get stronger, a great way to do that is to lift. The more consistently that you lift, the right lifts, all that kind of stuff, the stronger that you'll get. I think your faith is very similar to that because serving is a way to exercise your faith. When we step out and serve, we're exercising our faith, and just like lifting weights helps our muscles grow, I think that serving helps our faith grow. And I think in our story for tonight, we see this play out very practically. So one of the main guys, who's the first guy that was listed in the 7 chose to serve to distribute the food, was Stephen. He's the first guy, and he was described as a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. Okay, so Stephen, he was called upon to distribute the food, right? They felt that preaching and teaching about Jesus was a little bit higher than the distribution of food, and so they got this other group to distribute that, and Stephen was in one of those groups, and for whatever reason, I don't know, but for whatever reason, Stephen was not one of those guys that was preaching and teaching. He wasn't there yet. He wasn't given that responsibility, but he was given the responsibility to distribute the food. Well, if you just look at the next chapter in Acts chapter 7, we see that Stephen ends up getting arrested. He gets accused of doing something that he didn't do, and now he's on trial. And Stephen takes this opportunity to tell people about God. The whole chapter of Stephen telling these people that just arrested him, telling the high priest about who God is and what he's done. At the beginning of the story, Stephen's not ready for that. He's obedient to where he is. He serves in a small way, and I don't think it's wrong to make the connection that through that serving, he grew, his faith grew, he learned a lot, and he got to the point where he could then preach and teach people about who God was. And the same is true for us. We can grow in our faith by being willing to serve. Humbling ourselves, making a sacrifice, and serving people is a great way to be challenged and to spark and facilitate growth in our own lives. And I think one great example is your small group leaders. I think they can all testify to ways that they have grown in their own faith by being your small group leader. For me, I can think of 2 very practical examples of how this played out and what this looked like. So one, in college, I did a mentoring program at a local elementary school. I did it 2 different years, so I had 2 different kids. I have a picture of one of the kids. His name's Jay Maurice, called him Jay for short. But basically, this mentoring program, I just went to this elementary school once a week. I spent about an hour and a half with Jay, and our time looked different through the different weeks. Sometimes we would go to the gym and play games. Sometimes we'd stay in this room and play. We'd do homework. A lot of times we would set goals and just talk about how his week was. And I don't know for sure. We could ask him, but I don't know what he would say. But I'd like to think that in some way I impacted him through this time. I met with him for a whole year pretty regularly, once a week. And I'd like to say that I impacted him, and I don't know for sure. But what I can tell you is that through this experience, I was impacted. My faith grew during this experience. I grew a deep burden and care for people that were lost, for people who didn't know who Jesus was. I got practical experience sharing Jesus with someone that has no idea who he is. But probably the way that I grew the most was I grew in love and patience. Jay, he's an awesome kid, but he's not always the easiest to spend time with. He doesn't come from a very loving home. And so I got to have practical, real experience showing him love and showing him patience when we would meet together. I grew in those ways that I'm not sure if I would have grown if I didn't take this opportunity to serve. My second example is from a few summers ago. So this is a picture. I led a college Bible study a couple summers ago, and one night we had a service night, and we went to this local house and basically just tore the house down from the inside. And so it's a long story, but this is a house near Fairfax, one of our impact campuses, and this was a house in this neighborhood that was known for drugs, known for sex trafficking, known for prostitution, known for all of these things. Like, this was the house that it was known for. Mount Pleasant, our church, ended up buying this house just a way to stop all of that. So they bought it to stop this, but we didn't really have a direction of what we wanted to do. Eventually, it got to the point through a long process where there was this nonprofit organization called Isaiah 117 that came along, and Isaiah 117, they provide housing for kids that are taken out of their home before they're put into foster placement. Okay, so if a kid is taken out of their home for whatever reason, it's not safe or whatever it might be, Isaiah 117 is a house that they can stay at while they're waiting to get put into foster placement. And so my small group and I, we went and we just tore it apart because everything needed to be redone. And it was in a bad shape when we went. And I don't tell you this to say, look at what I did or look at what we did. But I tell you this to say, look at what God is doing. If you show the next picture, this is what the house looks like now. It's almost to the point where it's opened, where it's running, where kids can come and stay and have a safe place to play. And the reason that this impacts me so much is because I saw where it was at the beginning. Through this experience, through serving, my faith has grown because I've seen the way that God is at work. I've seen God move. I've seen the plan that he has had for this in this house in ways that I don't know if I would have experienced if I hadn't served at the beginning. And I don't want to make it seem like I had this big part. I served for 2 hours this one night. I'd been a couple different times, but I served 2 hours one night. There were hundreds of people that have put in hours and hours of service to get to this point. But my faith has grown because of that one night, those 2 hours that I put in to serve, and now being able to see how God has had his hand over it and how he's worked through all of it. Because when we serve, we're putting ourselves in a situation where we have an amazing opportunity to grow, to flourish, and to take the next step in our faith. God can do amazing things in and through people that are willing to serve. My last point is that there's a place for everyone to serve. There's a place for everyone to serve. Everyone has a role to play, and the church doesn't function the way that the church is supposed to function unless everyone does something. The way the church is designed is for everyone to be involved and to play a part. Everyone here in this room, we are a part of the larger church. We make up the church. We are the church. The church isn't a building. It's not necessarily a place you go, but it's the people. We are the church. Our church, Mount Pleasant, the larger church, we need you guys to serve. And when we serve, when we take that act of faith, we push along the mission of the church. Looking back at our text for tonight, there's a group of 7 guys chosen to handle some food. Right? Doesn't necessarily seem like this huge task. They were told to serve food to these people. But the way that the story ends in verse 7, it says, "So God's message continued to spread. The number of believers greatly increased in Jerusalem, and many of the Jewish priests were converted too." God's message continued to spread, and the number of believers greatly increased, large part because of these 7 men that were willing to take on this responsibility and meet this need. Like I said, I don't know what happens if those guys aren't willing to do this, because now the apostles and the leaders of the church are split between different responsibilities, but they met a practical need, and the church grew and flourished because of it. I think a lot of people kind of get the wrong idea and the understanding of what the church is. The church isn't just a place that we're supposed to go and receive from, but the church is a place that we're supposed to give to and to serve as a part of. It's an active thing. We are all a part of the church, and we all have a role to play. 1 Corinthians 12 is a great example of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's in your Bible apps, and you can look it up later and read it. But 1 Corinthians 12, it talks about how the human body has many parts, right? And an arm can't say to a leg, I don't need you. An eye can't say to a foot, I don't need you. We have different body parts. We have different purposes for those body parts, but our arms, our legs, eyes, eyelids, fingernails, all that stuff, they make up our body, right? All together, they make up the body. And this illustration is to show that all of us, we are those parts, and together we make up the church. We all have a part to play. We all have a role to play. There's a place within the church for everyone to serve. Everyone is needed, and we all need to serve, because when we come together and serve, we push the mission of the church forward in a way that it can't be done if we don't serve. Here's our bottom line for tonight. You've heard me say it a couple times, but the bottom line is that God can do amazing things in and through people that are willing to serve. And I believe that it's a two-way street, right? I believe that when we serve, God can use that to impact the person being served. God can work through people that are willing to serve to impact and change and transform people's lives. We've all been impacted by someone that's been willing to serve, right? Again, your small group leaders are great examples of this. I'm sure they have impacted you through their willingness to serve. But the other side of this coin is true as well. I believe that serving can be a catalyst for our own faith. That when we choose to serve God, He can do that to do amazing things in us. That when we serve, God can use that experience, He can use that heart to transform and to change us, to grow us in our own faith. Right, just like the lava lamp from earlier, it's not doing anything, right? It wasn't doing anything before, but when we add this catalyst in, that's when the growth happens. The same is true in our faith. When we feel like we're stuck, when we feel like we're not moving, when it feels like we've hit a wall, serving can be that catalyst, can be that thing that sparks the growth, that sparks the transformation in our own lives. So my challenge is very practical, okay? My challenge is just to find a place to serve. Find a place to get plugged in, find a place to serve. I know some of you are already doing that, and I encourage you to keep doing it. I applaud you for doing that, and I encourage you to keep doing so. But if you're not, my challenge is to find a place to serve. Because this message means nothing if we don't take action and serve as a result of it. And there's so many different ways that you can serve. There's so many different areas that you can get plugged in. It doesn't have to be just at the church. Like my example with the mentoring, that's outside of the church. That's not connected to the local church. But we do have some really great opportunities within the church that you can get plugged in with right now and serve. So we have a couple QR codes. I think there's links in the Bible app as well. But the Love Your Neighbor and Family Fun Night, these are two one-night events that the church is putting on. Love Your Neighbor is coming this Saturday. Those are at all our impact sites. That's a night where you can go to one of those impact sites and serve just for a couple hours. It's a very low commitment way to get your feet kind of wet and serve in that way. Another one is Family Fun Night. That's a night coming up in September where we put on just like it says, a fun night for families. We have a lot of stuff going on outside at the CLC fields, and again, that's a low commitment way to get involved, to serve just for a couple hours to try it out and to see how it goes. The third QR code is more of a high level commitment. It's more of a long term type of thing, and through that. So the first two QR codes, that takes you straight to a registration site where you can register and get signed up. The third one is just a I'm interested type of form. Okay, so it's not, if you scan that, it's not like you're already committed, but that's a way to say, hey, I'm interested in serving. I'd love to hear more information. And the three areas for that one are Bibleopolis, so the little kids across the street on Sunday morning, youth sports. And so with this one, the vision here is that you would be a assistant youth sports coach. That might frighten some of you about coaching, but really you don't need to know anything about sports. All you're really doing is helping the head coach, and you're really just loving on the kids. So it's 2 nights a week. You're hanging out with kids, and you're showing the love of Christ to them in that way. And the last one is the Impact Center, which you guys know is on the backside of the campus. but there's a lot of needs there that you can get plugged in. So that last QR code is more regular serving opportunities where you'd get plugged in and serve kind of regularly for a period of time. But here's the thing. Don't miss an opportunity to impact someone else's life, but also to grow your faith by serving. Don't pass it up. Get involved. We need you to serve, and there's a place for you to do so. Choose to serve and watch how God can use that to change lives and to change your own life. Because God can do amazing things in and through people that are willing to serve.